Hello and welcome back to Modern Jubilees. Today let's talk about who are the Philistines. This is very, very relevant right now because people are associating specifically the Gazans, if not the Arabs in the West Bank. Specifically, the Gazans are very much associated with the Philistines, and the name Palestine is associated with the ancient Philistines. It was renamed Syria Palestina because the Philistines had ruled the Gaza Strip area for a while. But who were they and where did they come from is really important to talk about, especially right now as the world is trying to figure out what to do with this very radicalized piece of land and group of people who are the Gazans. So let's look at who the ancient Philistines were. First of all, let's look at some maps. We have a quote here from Judges 1:18. And Yehuda took Gaza with its border, and Ashkelon with its border, and Ekron with its border. The Gaza area is part of the tribe of Judah's plot, and it was conquered by the Israelites at a few points at the time of the Judges, and later on, after the time of the Maccabees, during the Hasmonean time period, around the time of the Hanukkah holiday, which is when the Greeks were ruling in the area. But for a while, and for a long time, this area around Gaza was ruled by the Philistines. So who were they? Where did they come from? First of all, in Hebrew, the Philistines are the Plishtim. Plishtim, from the word pleshet, is an invader. These were invaders. They were not from this land. They came from the sea. And where did they come from? We're going to discuss. Now, we know that the Philistines and the Kaftorites, Kaftor is Crete. It is that second island westward from the coast of Israel. First you have Cyprus, and then you have Crete. And Crete is known in the Bible as Kaftor. And the Kaftorites, or the Philistines, both of them, descend from Mizraim, son of Ham. We see this in Genesis 10:13 through 14, and Mizraim begat the Ludim, the Anamim, the Lehabim, the Naphtuchim, the Fathursim, the Kasluchim, and the Kaftorim, whence the Philistines came forth. Meaning, the Kaftorim all come from Mizraim, and that's where the Philistines come from. They come from these Kaftorites. Basically, Mizraimites settled in these islands and then from there went eastward to Israel and settled on the Gaza Strip area. So let's review what we're talking about here, right? Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Here I put a few flags, just examples. Obviously, many more flags fall into all these categories, especially, Japheth or Ham. So Greece, by the way, a lot of people think that the Philistines come from the Greeks. That's false. The Greeks come from Yavan. Yavan is one of the sons of Japheth. I only list 2 here, but there are many sons of Japheth. And one of them is Yavan, and that is the Hebrew word for Greece. And that's the Greek people, they're Japhethites. On the other hand, there's Shem, and Shem is given the middle of the earth, as we've seen in many other videos. From Shem, we get Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Israel. Jacob is renamed Israel. We also get Esav, Edom, Amalek actually comes through Esav. And from Lot, we get the Moabites and the Ammonites, and there are many other tribes and people that come from Shem who settle in these lands that are Semitic, that are in the Middle East, and they belong there. But there are some people who came to the Middle East who did not belong there, that wasn't part of the land that was promised to them in chapters 8 and 9 of Jubilees and in the oath that Noah and his sons make. So the Hamites bring forth the Canaanites, and Canaan and Mizraim are 2 sons of Ham. There were others, but Canaan was given West Africa, but instead he goes and settles in the land of Israel. And we're told in Jubilees 8 and 9 and 10, specifically the end of 10, that all the brothers go to Canaan and tell him, you're going to be cursed, like you're ultimately cursed because you're settling in a land that isn't yours, don't do this. But he does it anyway. And Mizraim, which is the Hebrew word for Egypt, in this case, it's everything west of the Nile Delta, is Mizraim until it reaches the land of Put, which is Libya. And from Mizraim, we get, first of all, Hagar is a daughter of Mizraim, and from Avram and Hagar, we get Ishmael. So they're sort of a little bit of a blend, but very much Semitic because they come through the line of Abraham. The tribe goes through the father, but the Philistines also come from Mizraim, as we're going to unpack here. The Philistines are Mizraimites, the Philistines are Hamites, and so they are called invaders because they came even later than the Canaanites, but clearly did not belong because they are ultimately from Africa and from Egypt. And that's what we have to understand here. For some reason, nobody really gets this, and people think that the Philistines and by extension the Palestinians, who it's arguable if they have a connection to the Philistines, but let's say they do, especially the Gazans. People think they're Greek. They're not Greek. No, they were on the island of Kaftor, which is Crete, which you could think of as a Greek type of island, but it's not, because actually Kaftor and Cyprus belong to the plot of Shem, whereas everything west of that belongs to Japheth and Yavan and Greece. So they're very much not Greek. They are actually Mitzrayimites, they're Egyptians. The Philistines are straight out Egyptians. All right, so to watch where they went from Mizraim, the land of Mizraim. They went to Kaftor, and they were there for some time, and then they went to the Eretz Pleshet. They went as invaders to the western coast by Gaza. If they were in a lower area, it would be different, but they're very much in the plot of Shem, the Semite plot, specifically the land of Israel, which is promised to the children of Israel, and specifically in the land of Judah, which is this area of Jerusalem, Gaza. All right, so they're in the wrong area, and they are very much not Greek. The Plishtim, the Philistines, they are Mizraimites. All right, let's see some just basic idea of who are these people again. In the Bible, we hear about them because to avoid war with them, when God takes the Israelites out of Egypt, he brings them a longer route to the Holy Land. We see this in Exodus 13:17. Now when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by way of the lands of the Philistines, although it was nearer, for God said, the people may have a change of heart when they see war and return to Egypt. Meaning God knows that they ultimately will have to fight the Philistines, but that they're very harsh people to fight, and that now that the Israelites were just saved from slavery and they were just liberated from hundreds of years of slavery, it's not exactly the time to do this war that we're seeing play out in 2023, 2024, 2025, since October 7th attack. And this is a war like we haven't seen there. This is a real war because October 7th was sort of the nail in the coffin for, I guess, the Israelites who realized that they can't accept the situation being even possible to reoccur. Another thing that is famous about the Philistines is that they were idol worshipping. They had a statue called Dagon, which had a fish bottom, and they worshipped this statue. This is one of the statues that features in the book of Samuel as part of some stories there. And they famously capture the Ark of Covenant during a battle, but then they get a plague that comes over their people, and so they end up returning it. That's in 1 Samuel 4-6. And King David defeats their giant Goliath is also a very famous story that we all know, 1 Samuel 17. There's also the story of Samson and Delilah, which also takes place in Gaza. So there's a lot of famous stories. But let's see what we know about them. They're an expansionist fighting sea people who came from Crete, i.e. Kaftor, that's how it's known biblically, and settled on the southwestern coast in Greater Gaza. Here are some sources that talk about them in the Bible. In Amos we see, "True, I brought Israel up from the lands of Egypt, but also the Philistines from Kaftor and the Arameans from Kir." Basically, the idea is God saying, I am what is behind all of these movements of mankind. Deuteronomy 2:23, "So too with the Avim who dwelt in villages in the vicinity of Gaza, the Kaftorim who came from Crete, wiped them out and settled in their place." So it's giving examples of people conquering one another, and it's saying the Avim are these people who lived in the Gaza area before the Kaftorim who came from Crete, meaning the Philistines who had settled in Kaftor. They came and they had conquered the lands from the Avim who were there before it. We're learning that from Deuteronomy 2:23. They wiped them out and settled in their place. So these Philistines actually conquered another people who were there before them. The Avim, I don't know who they are. Jeremiah 47:4, "For God will ravage the Philistines, the remnant who came from the island of Kaftor." So again, we're seeing over and over the Philistines came from the islands of Kaftor, but we also saw that the Kaftorites and the Philistines are Mizraimites, children of Ham, and so they belong in Egypt. All right, this is a illustration that I made of the chapters 8 and 9 in Jubilees, where God is having a covenant made, where a covenant is made between Noah and his children in the presence of an angel. They do a lottery to see who gets what plot. The cold plot goes to Japheth, the middle of the earth goes to Shem, and the hot places go to Ham. And this is the illustration of that pact. Expulsions of modern Palestinians. So basically, these modern Palestinians, they came from Mitzrayim, they went to Kaftor, they went to Gaza, and things haven't been going so well for them. They haven't been getting along very well with the other people around them. Some of the things that happen with the modern Palestinians, if we do want to say that they are connected very intimately with the Philistines, we'll give a few examples. Let's start in Jordan. In Jordan, they went to, after the 6-Day War, which they lost, they went to Jordan. The PLO, the Palestinian Authority, calls for an overthrow of the Jordanian monarchy. They engaged in robbery for financial purposes, basically extortion of the local population, in order to continue a war against Israel. They launched rockets at Israel and conducted PFLP plane hijackings with taking hostages. And in 1970, there was a war between the PLO and the Jordanian forces. Black September, a Palestinian group, assassinated the Jordanian prime minister, and so the PLO was expelled from Jordan. They went to Lebanon, and in the 70s and 80s, the PLO merged with some Marxist groups, and they allied to destabilize the Maronite Christian government. This led to an extremely bloody civil war that Lebanon has not really recovered from to this day. And then here we have Kuwait also in 1991. Around 300,000 Palestinians, which was at the time around 1/5 of Kuwait's population, was expelled after the first Gulf War because they were supporting Saddam Hussein's attempted invasion of Kuwait from Iraq. And so they've been kicked out of many places. They've caused a lot of war and problems in many places. They're very much a fighting people and an expansionist people, and they're invaders. That's the name, Pleshet. They are the invading people because they don't belong in the land of Shem. They're not Semitic at all. They are Hamites. All right, and the Philistines in Jubilees, there is a lot here, and I don't want to get into all of it, but I do want to get into a specific part. So first of all, in Genesis 26, we see there was a famine in the land, meaning the land of Israel. Besides for the first famine that was in the times of Abraham. So Yitzchak, Isaac, goes to Avimelech, king of the Plishtim, in Gerar, which is just southeast of Gaza. So Isaac goes down to this border area, and he goes to the Philistine king. God appeared to him and said, don't go to Egypt, don't go to Mizraim, stay in the land that I will tell you about. Live in this land, and I'll be with you and bless you, because to you and your children I will give all of these lands, and I will perform the oath that I swore to Abraham your father. I'll multiply your seed as the stars of heaven, etc., because Abraham obeyed my voice, etc. So Yitzchak lives in Gerar, this Philistine border area. And the men of the place asked him about his wife, and he said, she's my sister, because he was afraid to say she's my wife, because the men of the place might kill him on account of Rivka, because she was so beautiful. This really does give the vibe of the Gazan population, very intense, the kinds of things we saw on October 7th, and that they do to their own people who don't approve of their rule, specifically Hamas or other groups as well. So they are, killing their own people right now, and torturing those who are against their rule and want them to give back the hostages and want the war to end. Anyway, so he had been there for a while, and Avimelech, the king of the Philistines, looked out and he saw that Isaac was having a good time with his wife. And Avimelech called Yitzchak and said, look, I see that she's your wife. Why did you say she's your sister? Isaac said, I don't want to die because of her. Avimelech says, what have you done to us? One of the people might easily have wanted to be with her, and you would have brought guiltiness upon us. So Avimelech charged all his people, and he said, anyone who touches this man or his wife should be killed. So Yitzchak starts to plant seeds in the land, and he receives 100-fold. God blesses him very much. Isaac grew to be very great, and he grew until he was very, very great. He had a great possession of flocks, herds, and a great store of servants. And the Plishtim were envious of him. They had allowed him to live there, meaning they had been okay with him living there. And now that he has grown so great, they become envious. They were jealous of him. So all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the days of his father, the Plishtim stopped them up and filled them with earth. So they got so jealous of Isaac that they start to stop up the wells that Abraham had dug. This also reminds me of Gaza, because in 2005, after the disengagement, the Israelites leave, and they leave greenhouses and this amazing infrastructure that they could have done so much with. But instead of taking it and running with it, they destroy everything. Even though it would have been good for them, it would have brought them food and money and prosperity. They didn't want anything to do with the Israelites, so they stopped up any of the blessings that the Israelites did leave for them. And so that reminds me here of the wells that they start to stop up. Avimelech says to Isaac, "Go away. You're too strong. You got too big." Isaac leaves and he camped in the valley of Gerar and he stayed there. And Isaac dug the wells of water that they had dug in the time of Abraham because the Philistines had stopped them up after Abraham died. And he called their names after the names by which his father had called them. So he redigs the wells and he gives them back their names that Abraham had given them. Isaac's servants dug in the valley and they find there a well of spring water. The herdsmen of Gerar were fighting with Yitzchak's herdsmen and they said, "The water is ours." And he named the well's water Esek because they strove with him. They were fighting. So they dug another well and they fought for that too. And he called it Sitna. And he removed from there and he left there and dug another well. And they weren't fighting over this, so he calls this Rechovot. He says, now God has made room for us and we shall be fruitful in the land. Rachav is wide. And we have a Rechovot in Israel these days. That is probably the same exact place because that's how it usually works in Israel with names, is that you really have to prove that there's a real connection to the biblical name before you get to actually call something by such a name, a biblical name. He went up from there to Beersheba, and God appeared to him and said, "I am the God of your father. Do not be afraid, I am with you, I will bless you and make you great, multiply your seed." He built an altar there, he called on God's name, and he pitched his tent there. And Yitzchak's servants dug a well, and Avimelech went to him from Gerar, and Achuzat his friend. And Yitzchak said to them, "Why do you come to see me? Because you hate me, and you sent me away from you, because I was, too successful." And they said, "We saw indeed that the Lord is with you. We saw that God is with you. And so let there be an oath between us. Let's make a covenant. Let's make amends. We see how blessed you are. We don't want to be caused hurt by you, because we haven't touched you, even though we sent him away. We sent you away and stopped up your wells. We haven't touched you," they're saying. "Don't do us harm. We see that God is with you. And so we've done only good for you, and we sent you away in peace. So you're now blessed of God." He made them a feast. They ate and drank. They rose up early and swore to one another. And Yitzchak sent them away, and they departed in peace. And it came to pass that when Yitzchak's servants came and told him about the well that they had dug, they said to him, "We found water." And he called it Shiva, so that city's name is Beersheba, going all the way east towards the middle there of the desert area. And that's where we have Beersheba to this day. Esau was 40 years old when he took Yehudit, the daughter of Be'eri, the Hittite, and Basmat, the daughter of Elon, the Hittite, and they were a grief of mine to Yitzchak and to Rivka because they were Hittites, which means they were Canaanites, which means they were Hamites, which means they weren't supposed to be mating with them necessarily, but Esau wasn't the chosen son anyway. Isaac's son, Jacob, ends up being the chosen son, and he is renamed Israel. Now, this is so interesting, and there's so much to go into with all this, but I do want to just look at the Jubilees because there's something extra in the Jubilees that tells this story, and it is very relevant to this conversation about who are the Philistines. So here we have Avimelech, king of the Philistines, and this is mirrored in Genesis 26 as we saw. The famine permeated the land. This is what we read so far. Isaac left to go down to Egypt. He went to the king of the Philistines. God said, "Don't go to Egypt, stay in the land," etc. This is the story we're familiar with and that we read. And it's sort of retelling this story. He farmed and he got 100 times as much. He became prosperous, so they plug up the wells that his father's young men had dug when Abraham was alive, and they filled them with earth. Very spiteful, silly thing to do, to block up somebody's well. That's not something you do if you live in the desert. Avimelech said to Isaac, "Go away, you became too powerful." Isaac leaves. He camps in Gerar. They redug the wells that had been dug, that had been plugged up. He gave them the same names. They dug in the valley. They found a new well with living waters. And the shepherds of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's shepherds, saying, "The water is ours." They named this well Challenge. This is a translation, of course. And he builds an altar there where Abraham had built one. He offered a sacrifice. They dug a well. They found living waters. Isaac's servants dug another well, and they didn't find water. They went and told Isaac they hadn't found any water. And Isaac said, "Today I made an oath with the Philistines, and now this thing has been announced to us." So the Jubilees gives a different account where right after the oath was made with Avimelech, the king of the Philistines, something unlucky happened, something bad happened, which is they weren't able to find a well, they weren't able to find living waters. So Isaac names this place the well of the oath because he swore to Abimelech, but because they were unlucky that day and they did not find water that day, he knew that they had sworn to make peace with them under duress, meaning he was feeling that this was not a good thing that happened, that they had come and they pressured him into making this oath with him after kicking him out and filling up all these wells with dirt and ruining them. Then they come to him because they realize how blessed he is, and they realize that they made a mistake and they don't want to be cursed by God, but it wasn't genuine. And so here in Jubilees, there's this recording that Isaac realizes that this oath was made under duress and that it wasn't good, and so he curses the Philistines. That day, Isaac cursed the Philistines and said, "Cursed are the Philistines to the day of wrath and rage above all the nations. May God make them a disgrace, a curse, and an object of wrath and rage to the sinful nations and the Kittim. Whoever escapes the sword of the enemy and the Kittim, may the righteous nation root them out in judgment from under heaven. They will be enemies and haters to my children throughout their generations on earth. No remnant will remain from them. None will be saved on the day of the wrath of judgment. The entire seed of the Philistines is destined for destruction, rooting out, and expulsion from the land. No remnant or name will remain for their seed on earth. Even if he ascends to heaven, he will be brought down from there. Even if he is fortified on earth, he will be torn down from there. Even if he hides himself among the Gentiles, they will root him out from there. Even if he descends into Sheol, he will be judged there as well, and he will have no peace. If he is taken into captivity, he will be killed along the way by those that seek his life. No name or remnant will be left of him on earth. He will go to eternal damnation. Such it is written and engraved about him on the heavenly tablets to do to him on the day of judgment, so that he may be rooted out of the earth." And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what we have about the Philistines. Isaac curses them greatly because they had treated him badly, blocked up all the wells that his father had dug, and later on in Jubilees, we also see that they join with Jacob's brother, Esav. So this Isaac, he had two sons, Jacob and Esav, and Jacob becomes the chosen son who becomes Israel, and Esav does not. And there ends up being a war between Esav's children and Jacob's children, and Jacob's children win, but it's notable that the Philistines end up joining Esav in fighting against Jacob. So they're always on the side opposite God. They're not with God. And we see that today as well. We saw that on October 7th. All the actions they took were completely inexcusable. Burning families alive, burning babies alive, choking babies to death, just really, really crazy stuff. A lot of torture, a lot of sexual torture, really crazy things. And a lot of it was filmed. Like, you can actually watch these crazy things, so it's impossible to deny at this point. All right, so here we have Gerar, right? This is Judea, and Gerar is just southeast of Gaza, and then you have Beersheba here. So this story is taking place in this area, and here also Gerar, Beersheba. So it's this whole area of Greater Gaza where this story is taking place. This is the ancient Philistines that Isaac curses, and that don't belong anyway because they're Mizraimites. So again, reminder, they're from Mitzrayim. They were living in Kaftor. They came and they were Plishtim. They were the invaders. And that is where the name Philistines comes from. And that is where the Palestinians are trying to associate with. Like, they're claiming descent from the Philistines and saying, oh, the Philistines are indigenous. They're not indigenous. And as we've seen in other videos, the Canaanites are also not indigenous. All right, that's it for the ancient Philistines. I hope that this was interesting and enlightening. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Please subscribe to this channel, like, comment, interact. This is an important discussion. It's part of current events. It is critical that we understand the history, and these ancient texts that we have and that we have preserved are the best knowledge we have of what the actual story of history is. All right, so bless you all very much for taking part in this journey of learning together these important ancient texts, such as the very important text of Jubilees that I will link below, a link to the book that I worked on of a modern English translation with the commentaries, which is what we're using in these videos. Wishing you all the very, very best. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. This is Modern Jubilees, and we will see you next time.